She entered the tomb with a broken heart, and walked out whole. No one could explain how, except her. Summer of 2018. The Ferraro family left their quiet town in Florence, Italy, with a single purpose: to seek a miracle. Their youngest daughter, Giulia, only 7 years old, had been diagnosed with a rare congenital heart defect at birth. Her condition had worsened over the years. Shortness of breath, fainting spells, and a weak pulse had become part of her daily life. Doctors had delivered the truth without comfort. Her heart might not hold out past her 8th birthday. And so, the Ferraros placed their final hope not in medicine, but in faith. They packed light. No toys, no luxuries. Just rosaries, prayer cards, and a small notebook filled with handwritten petitions. For them, this trip to the Vatican wasn't a vacation, it was a quiet offering. A way of saying, God, if you are there, please hear us. When they arrived in Rome, the sunlight was blinding. And the streets were buzzing with tourists. Yet amidst the chaos, there was a strange stillness in Giulia's eyes. She didn't speak much. She simply clutched her mother's hand, staring at the towering spires of St. Peter's Basilica. Is God really inside? She whispered once, her voice soft like breath on glass. The mother smiled, hiding the ache behind her eyes. He's everywhere, my love. But yes, especially here. That afternoon, after Mass and a short tour, the family was led to a special area, the Vatican crypts. Hidden beneath the marble majesty of the basilica. A sacred place. Quiet. Heavy with centuries of prayer and loss. They descended slowly into the cool shadows, unaware that something was waiting. And beneath those stone arches, in the silence of the tombs, Giulia's journey would take a turn no one could have imagined. The air grew colder as the Ferraro family descended deeper into the Vatican crypts. The golden sunlight from above faded into shadows cast by flickering candles and ancient lamps hanging from wrought iron chandeliers. The scent of old stone mixed with faint traces of incense filled the narrow corridors. Giulia clung tightly to her mother's hand, her small footsteps echoing softly against the cold marble floor. Her wide eyes darted nervously between the dimly lit statues of saints and popes, their faces carved with solemn expressions, silent watchers of a forgotten time. The guide whispered stories of faith and sacrifice, but Giulia barely heard. Her mind seemed to wander, captivated by the strange silence and the weight of history pressing down upon them. Suddenly, in the confusion of the slow-moving crowd, Giulia slipped from her mother's grasp. A single heartbeat later, she was gone. The mother turned sharply. Eyes frantic, only to see the empty corridor ahead. Panic surged through her veins as she called out, voice trembling. Giulia! Where are you? No answer. The guide and other visitors stopped, sensing the alarm. Lights were turned on, flashlights swept through the shadows. But in this labyrinth of stone and silence, no child's voice echoed back. Minutes passed like hours. Then, just as desperation reached its peak, an elderly Vatican guard stepped forward, his face pale, eyes narrowing in the gloom. He pointed silently down a narrow passage leading to a secluded chamber, an area rarely visited by tourists. There, bathed in the weak glow of a single candle, stood Giulia. She was motionless. Her hand rested gently upon the worn stone statue of Christ, whose eyes seemed to glimmer in the dim light. No tears. No fear. Only stillness. And then, in a whisper barely audible, Giulia said, I heard him. He told me my heart would not hurt anymore. The room felt heavy, almost sacred. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, making the statue of Christ appear almost alive, his eyes reflecting a strange, gentle sorrow. Giulia stood completely still, her small hand resting on the cold stone chest of the statue. Her gaze was fixed, as if she was locked in a silent conversation with something beyond the physical world. The Vatican guard approached cautiously, his voice low and respectful. "Little one, are you all right?" Julia slowly turned to look at him, her eyes unusually calm and bright for a child who had been lost in the crypt. "Yes," she whispered. "He told me I'm going to be okay now. That my heart will stop hurting." Her mother rushed to her side, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak, only holding Julia tightly. The other visitors stood silently, unsure of what to do. The air was thick with an unspoken presence, a powerful stillness that seemed to wrap the room in a protective embrace. No one dared interrupt the moment. For a few long minutes. The only sound was the soft crackling of the candle flame and Julia's steady breathing. Then, with a faint smile, Julia released her hand from the statue and looked up at her mother. "Can we go now?" They all knew, somehow, that whatever had happened beneath the Vatican had changed everything. Julia's return to the surface was met with a mix of relief and quiet awe. Her mother held her close, whispering prayers of gratitude. Yet, the true miracle awaited them at the hospital. At Bambino Gesù Pediatric Hospital, the doctors ran their tests as they always did, echocardiograms, blood work, monitoring her vitals. But this time, the results were unlike anything they had seen before. The congenital defect that had plagued Julia since birth had visibly improved. The blood flow to her heart was stronger. The strain and blockages that once threatened her life were inexplicably less severe. One doctor, skeptical but honest, admitted under his breath, "If this isn't a miracle, then I don't know what is." For the Ferraro family, it was proof that faith and hope were not just words, but forces that could defy even the most impossible odds. Julia herself seemed lighter. As if the burden of her illness had been lifted from her small shoulders. Back home in Florence, life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Yet, something in Julia had changed forever. Every night before sleep, she would place her small hand over her chest and whisper softly, "He is still here. I can feel him." Her mother, once skeptical and fearful, now kept a rosary close by and had begun attending Mass regularly, her faith rekindled by the impossible. The old Vatican guard's words echoed in their minds. Not everyone who walks the crypt is called by name. Perhaps he had been waiting for Julia all along. And for those who hear a silent calling in the depths of their souls, between the shadows and light, there lies a hope that transcends understanding. Because sometimes, healing comes not from medicine, but from the touch of something far greater, the whisper of grace beneath the cold stones of history. Sometimes, in the quietest and darkest places, we find the most unexpected miracles. Julia's story reminds us that faith can move beyond what the eyes see and what science explains. It whispers to our hearts, that even when all seems lost, hope remains. If you've ever felt a calling in the silence, a light in the shadows, remember, you are never truly alone. Miracles may be waiting for you in the most unlikely places. Thank you for listening. May peace and grace find their way to your heart tonight.